I don't remember the exact moment the conference room door closed behind me, or the sound of Ethan Cole's shoes against the wooden floor, but I remember his voice, too calm for a man who had just ended 14 years of my work at NovaDyne Technologies. He stood in front of me like someone announcing an audit result, not the end of a career. The company is restructuring, he said, his mouth curling as if he'd just pitched a brilliant financial idea. We need people who are more dynamic, more adaptable to the new data age. I sat still, watching him. The light bouncing off the table made his silver watch glint, brand new. Men like him always had watches shinier than their intellect and ties that still held the fold from the box. Ethan was the kind of man who walked into a room believing he was in control just because his business card said CFO. I didn't speak. He mistook my silence for obedience. I was just observing. The way he leaned forward slightly, eyes darting around, never holding a gaze too long, that told me enough. A newly promoted man eager to prove himself by stepping on someone else. I understand, I said evenly. I just hope you understand how Aurora breathes. He blinked. He didn't. Aurora wasn't just a financial forecasting system. It was a living organism I had nurtured for nearly a decade. Machine learning algorithms built on energy cycle data, code that connected thousands of market fluctuations, and security layers designed like antibodies, protecting the system from human error. Ethan rested his hands on the table, pretending to stay in control. We'll transfer all the data to the technical team. You don't need to worry. I smiled. I never worry about data. I only worry about who touches it. A faint crease formed between his brows. I caught the flash of irritation in his eyes before he replaced it with a polite smile. HR will reach out. You can leave today. I nodded. No protest, no defense. I stood, placed my pen on the table, and straightened the papers he'd just signed. Habit, after too many years of fixing other people's mistakes. On my way out, I paused by the glass wall overlooking Seattle. Rain was falling, tracing pale streaks down the window. I'd lived with that view for half my life, from when NovaDyne was a scrappy startup to the day it became a regional energy giant. I once believed I was part of that growth. Now I was just another name on the layoff list. At the reception desk, I packed a few things: an old ceramic mug with a crack on the rim, a photo of my team from the first Aurora launch, and a small black USB drive. It didn't hold any sensitive data, only a structural copy, enough to remind me that I knew exactly how Aurora worked and who could make it stop. When I passed the finance floor, heads lifted, then dropped again. A few sympathetic looks, a few tight smiles. No one said a word. In this company, silence was safer than loyalty. I stopped by Rachel's desk, the head of IT. She looked up, eyes wide. Olivia, I shook my head gently. Keep Aurora running. She wanted to say more, but I kept walking. At the main exit, the old security guard nodded, regret in his eyes. Good luck, Ms. Reed. I don't need luck, I said with a small smile. I have logic. When I pushed open the door, cold wind from the bay swept through, carrying the scent of rain and distant traffic. I stopped for a second, looking up at the glass tower. Somewhere on the 20th floor, Ethan was probably bragging about his first victory. I wondered if he realized that inside Aurora, my very first line of code was designed to monitor the biometric rhythm of its creator, a system built to recognize its owner's breath and lock itself the moment that breath disappeared from the network. I walked on, fingers closing around the USB in my pocket. I didn't feel angry, just that quiet calm, like the still surface of water before the wind rises. He thought he'd proven his power, but I knew he'd just started his own countdown. I didn't have to do anything. I just had to wait. At the corner, the red traffic light shimmered across the wet street like thousands of glowing code lines. I looked back at the distant tower. NovaDyne still ablaze with windows, each one a cold vein of the machine I'd once helped build. It no longer belonged to me, but I still knew every heartbeat inside it. I exhaled, watching my breath dissolve into the rain, and smiled faintly. Maybe you're hearing this while stuck in traffic or right after a long day at work. I want you to imagine something. If one day they told you that everything you'd built was now obsolete, what would you do? Tell me where you're listening from. Maybe from a small apartment like mine in Seattle, or an office glowing somewhere across the world. Because believe me, inside every glass tower, there's always at least one person quietly rewriting the rules. If you enjoy stories of intelligent revenge, hit subscribe and stay with me for what comes next. Sometimes silence isn't the end, it's the beginning of the most interesting chapter in the game. I left downtown as the rain began to fall harder. Streetlights smeared gold across my windshield, and I sat still in the long line of cars heading toward Lake Union, hands gripping the wheel like I could hold on to whatever had just slipped away. Seattle never really sleeps. It just changes tempo, loud by day with ambitious people, quiet at night with only rain and the lights from the corner coffee shop. I loved the city for that contrast, and now I felt like I was becoming part of the darkness in it. My apartment is small, quiet enough for one person and an 8-year-old who only comes by on weekends. On the table, my laptop stayed lit, the VPN connected to NovaDyne's backup server, the disaster recovery habit I had always kept. I opened the screen, signed into the backup system, and saw the familiar line. Aurora standby mode. Auto lock sequence. 48 hours remaining. 2 days. If there is no valid signal from my account in 48 hours, Aurora will automatically lock all administrative access and require biometric authentication. No one can get in without the fingerprint, voice print, and security code I set up. Not because I do not trust people, but because I have seen a system collapse when a CFO tried to take a shortcut to make the numbers look better. I poured a drink and sat by the window. The city glittered in the rain, the screen light cold and blue on the table. I thought about Ethan, about the look on his face when he read the layoff order without blinking. In his mind, I was obsolete software, a block of code with no use. What he did not understand was that Aurora was not just the company's system. It was a language between me and the data, something that responded to change, including changes born of arrogance. I opened the system logs, rows of entries scrolling like the veins of a living machine. I read each line and felt strange. Not anger, but a detachment, as if I had left a dead body and was watching it twitch. My phone buzzed. It was Rachel. Olivia, they are accessing the system. No one knows how to restart the reporting chain. Ethan says to remove the old security keys for now. I am worried. I stared at the screen, fingers hovering over the keyboard, and did not reply. Some lessons only come when someone else makes the mistake. I touched my glass and breathed in. Red wine always brings me back to late nights in the server room, when I would sit alone and write the lines that taught Aurora how to predict energy swings. I taught it to understand people, to detect when someone was manipulating data for personal gain. Now Aurora is teaching itself to protect. I closed my eyes. The system kept running in my head, silent, precise, cold as always. Each variable was a note I had learned to play. Now someone unfamiliar was trying to touch the score without knowing how to read it. Part of me wanted to warn them. Part of me wanted to see what happens when a perfect system meets the stupidity of power. Outside, the rain kept falling. I leaned back and let the city's hush wash over me. No excitement, no plotted revenge, just waiting. I whispered to myself, voice low enough that only Aurora, if it had a soul, might hear. Sleep, girl. When they touch you without knowing how, remember who made you. I shut the screen. The room went dark, except for the rain and the light filtering through the blinds. I do not have to do anything. They will find their own trap. 2 days passed faster than I expected. I didn't do much besides watch. Every morning, I made coffee, opened my laptop, and watched Aurora's log run in a steady rhythm. In the corner of the screen, the countdown kept shrinking. 001842 until auto lock. Everything was quiet, but I knew that inside that downtown tower, chaos was quietly forming. The first message came from Rachel, close to noon. Olivia, the financial forecast reports aren't loading. The CFO's in a meeting. He's ordering a full system reset. I stared at those words for a while, then smiled faintly. Resetting Aurora was like trying to restart a human being. It never obeyed brute commands. It only responded to the precise sequence I had buried in its security layers. That afternoon, the second message arrived. Access denied. Authorized. Architect O. Reed. A screenshot from a finance employee accidentally dropped in the public Slack channel. Underneath were dozens of comments. System glitch? Who's O. Reed? Does anyone know if Olivia still works here? It only took a few hours for rumors to spread across the company. Ethan, however, lost his patience in less than 10 minutes. He called an emergency meeting with IT. Rachel told me later that he practically shouted in everyone's faces. It's just a damn system. I want it back online now. Remove all restrictions. Delete the security codes. Do whatever it takes. Rachel tried to stay calm. Mr. Cole, Aurora isn't an ordinary software. If we interfere incorrectly, it might lock permanently. Then open it, Ethan snapped. That's an order. But Aurora wasn't a loyal dog waiting for orders. The moment the tech team tried to breach the first security tier, the system did exactly what I designed it to do. It switched into second-level defense mode. On their screens, messages poured in like a storm. Unrecognized command sequence. Security escalation. Tier 2 lockdown engaged. All forecasting data is archived for integrity protection. 10 years of NovaDyne's predictive data, the backbone of their contracts, investments, and stock projections, vanished from reach in seconds. Rachel said the room went dead silent. The server fans kept spinning, indicator lights still blinking, but no one dared to breathe. Ethan stood frozen in the middle of the room, face pale. He tried to look composed, barking orders, calling people, his voice turning dry and sharp. I want an outside specialist team. Call NetSec. Call anyone who can crack this system. Rachel objected. If you do that, we could lose the entire data structure. Aurora's encrypted through multiple layers. The only person who can explain it is Olivia. I don't need her, Ethan shouted. I'll prove I can run this company without anyone's old legacy. I read Rachel's recount that night while sipping coffee, watching the timer hit 00 hours. Aurora entered full lock mode. All administrative privileges are disabled. No one could open it. No one could copy the data. I knew that. At that very moment on the 20th floor, Ethan was staring at a bright red screen flashing the words, Access denied. Authorized. Architect O. Reed. It was a strange feeling. No satisfaction, no revenge, just a perfect stillness, like watching a storm touch down exactly where you predicted it would. Rachel called, her voice stretched thin. Olivia, the system's locked. He's furious. He thinks you did this on purpose. I only let it perform its function, I said evenly. Aurora was programmed to protect the data without valid authentication. If they think that's a problem, then the problem is them. Silence on the other end. Then a quiet sigh. He won't stop, she said. I know. I closed my laptop and looked out the window. The rain had stopped. Sunset spilled over Lake Union, golden light flickering on the glass of distant buildings. Somewhere out there, Ethan was shouting, blaming, trying to reclaim something he never understood. Aurora was calm. And for the first time in years, so was I. I didn't need to touch a keyboard anymore. Everything had already been written, every line, every condition, every reaction. I just had to wait a little longer because the real game had only just begun. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. The Seattle sky was a heavy gray, fog curling over the lake, and in my small apartment, the sound of boiling water pulsed like a system starting up. I opened my laptop. The screen was dark except for Aurora's access log moving slowly in the corner. The last line stopped at a red dot with a warning symbol. I clicked on it. Unauthorized penetration attempt detected. Source: NovaDyne, HQ. I smiled faintly. Ethan had done exactly what I expected. He couldn't accept defeat. When the system refused to obey, he started to believe he could buy his way through. By the end of the day, 3 more alerts appeared. They weren't just trying internal accounts anymore. One trace came from an out-of-state IP, routed through a private security service in Chicago. Hired hackers. Ethan had called for reinforcements. Aurora reacted precisely as I designed it to. When it detected foreign access chains, it activated third-tier defense, the layer of code no one knew existed except me. I built it as a lesson for anyone who thought data could be forced into obedience. I watched quietly as each intrusion command was denied line by line. At the bottom of the screen, an automatic message appeared. Security escalation completed, sending an encrypted alert to the registered architect. A soft ping confirmed the email had been sent. I leaned back, sipped my coffee, and opened my inbox. Inside was a single line. Intrusion log attached. Origin. CFO office. NovaDyne HQ. I felt nothing. Everything was moving exactly as planned, and all I needed to do was stay silent. I didn't call Rachel. I knew she was in the middle of the storm, trying to hold off orders from above without sparking more chaos. I didn't reach out to anyone at the company. I simply opened my notebook and wrote one sentence. When power meets intellect, the outcome depends on who can wait. Later that afternoon, Rachel messaged again. Just a few short lines. Ethan brought in a team from CyberShield in Chicago. They're working inside the secure room. He banned our IT staff from entering. I think he's desperate. I read it, closed my laptop, and said nothing. In my mind, I could see that room on the 18th floor, the pale white light, the wall of screens showing endless lines of code, the constant clatter of keyboards. Ethan is in the center, hands in his pockets, pretending to be in control. He didn't realize that every command they typed only made Aurora tighten its grip. One of the hackers would probably glance up, frown, and mutter, "This code isn't normal." Aurora didn't fight by blocking access outright. It waited. It recorded every attempt, every command, every IP address, then sent everything to the one place it trusted. The report reached me around midnight. 3 failed intrusions, 2 override attempts, 1 fake admin login. Then the final line, the one I always thought of as the heartbeat. Intrusion source locked. Countermeasure initiated. I opened the attachment just to be sure. Aurora had responded by disabling the mid-level management system. Nothing catastrophic. Just a few frozen dashboards, some unreadable reports, but enough to keep the finance department's lights on all night. In that moment, I knew Ethan wouldn't stop. For him, this wasn't business anymore. It was ego. I shut the laptop and stepped out onto the balcony. The rain was soft now, tapping against the metal railing, catching the glow of distant towers. I closed my eyes, breathed in the damp air, and thought about how power blinds people. Ethan was fighting a machine he never understood, a system built to obey logic, not hierarchy. Aurora had no emotions, yet it reacted to intrusion like a wounded organism, locking down, isolating, waiting to heal. I went back inside, sat down, and reopened the system log. The final line still pulsed steadily, like a heartbeat. All systems secure, awaiting architect instruction. I didn't type anything. I just watched the words for a while, then whispered, as if the machine could hear me. Let them learn how to fail. Outside, the city lights faded one by one. Somewhere inside the NovaDyne tower, a man was trying to beat logic with pride. And I just sat there, listening to the rain, waiting for Aurora to finish teaching its lesson. The next morning, when I turned on my phone, I knew the storm had truly begun. The screen overflowed with notifications. Messages from Rachel, a few emails from unknown senders, and one anonymous post on NovaDyne's internal forum are spreading faster than wildfire. The headline was cold and precise. Former employee Olivia Reed implanted sabotage code in the Aurora system? I sat still for a while, reading through the comments. Some sounded skeptical, others attacked without hesitation. No surprise. She always wanted full control. Classic type who refuses to hand things over. Total disaster. The company should sue. Can't just let it slide. I didn't need to guess who started it. Ethan didn't just want to prove himself right. He needed a scapegoat to hide his failure, and I was the perfect choice. Silent, gone, no longer able to defend myself. Rachel called me mid-morning. Olivia, they're blaming you for everything. Ethan told everyone you planted a trap in the system for revenge. He even told the CEO you refused to help. I paused. Does Eleanor believe him? Rachel sighed. I don't think she knows what to believe yet, but Ethan's manipulating the internal comms brilliantly. He's blocking accounts, spreading the story that you encrypted the system to keep control. I looked out the window, the morning light sliding across the lake. Anger rose fast and hot, then faded just as quickly, carried away by the cold air seeping through the window frame. Anger never helps. I had taught Aurora that emotion myself, the one variable that never yields reliable results. I knew he would do this, I said. Don't intervene, Rachel. Let him keep digging. I hung up and set the phone down. A few minutes later, another notification came through, a message from an old friend in legal. Olivia, they're preparing a legal notice. Be ready. I leaned back in my chair, taking a slow breath. I had thought I was cold enough not to feel anything, but at that moment, something stung in my chest. Not fear, but disappointment. All those people I'd worked with through late nights and financial crises were now choosing silence, or worse, self-preservation. Maybe loyalty only lasts until someone decides you're replaceable. I stepped out onto the balcony. The air was damp and cold, mist blurring the rooftops in the distance. I wondered if Ethan was standing somewhere inside that tower, staring at his collapsed data, trying to convince everyone it was my fault, when in truth he'd broken it himself with his own ignorance. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my daughter, Emma. Mom, I saw something online. They're saying you did something wrong at work. Are you okay? Reading that tiny line made my throat tighten. I typed back slowly, each word deliberate. I'm okay. Remember what I told you about data? Data doesn't lie. It proves itself. After that message, I felt lighter. Ethan could control the narrative, twist perceptions, manipulate headlines, but he couldn't rewrite what Aurora had recorded, second by second. Every action of his, from unauthorized access to hiring hackers, was preserved. I didn't need to defend myself. I just needed to wait for the truth to speak. That afternoon, a tech journalist reached out through my personal email. An internal source says you were the only one with full access to Aurora. Would you like to share your side of the story? I didn't respond. I marked it unread and shut the computer down. Speaking now would only drag me into a war of words, where truth mattered less than who shouted louder. I went out for a walk along the lake. The sky was turning gold, the light scattering across the water. I saw my reflection ripple in the surface, calm, unshaken. Silence, I thought, is the weapon people underestimate most. When others talk too much, they expose themselves. All I have to do is wait. That night, Rachel sent me a copy of a secondary log she'd secretly extracted before Ethan revoked her access. I opened it, scrolling through hundreds of failed hacker commands, then stopped at the last line. Attempted data overwrite, initiated by user, Cole admin. He'd left his own signature without realizing it. I laughed quietly, not out of joy, but with a kind of resigned clarity. Ethan had just signed his own confession. I didn't need to touch a keyboard. Aurora was already doing what I built it to do, reflect the truth. That night, I wrote one line in my notebook. Sometimes all you have to do is stay silent long enough for the noise to reveal its own guilt. I closed the notebook and blew out the candle on the table. The room sank into darkness, and in that stillness, I could sense something moving, not from me, but from within the system itself. Aurora was still recording, every action, every word, and all I had to do was wait, because in every chaotic symphony, there comes a moment when the music stops, and everyone is forced to listen to the final note of silence. 3 days later, NovaDyne held its quarterly meeting. The event was streamed live to every shareholder, department, and media outlet. I wasn't there, but I could picture it perfectly. The sterile white light of the 23rd floor conference room, the company logo glowing across the glass wall, and Ethan Cole standing at the podium, full of confidence, convinced he still had control. That morning, I sat in a cafe near my apartment, laptop open. Aurora had already sent its first alert hours earlier. Forecast module locked. Unauthorized access attempt detected. I knew what that meant. Ethan was still trying. He believed that if he could pull off one flawless presentation, he could reclaim his image. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. Rachel. I answered and heard the rush of noise behind her. Voices. Keyboards, the crackle of tension. Olivia, it's happening. He's presenting, but the system won't open. The screen's bright red, full of error codes. I paused. Does everyone know? Everyone. The investment board's right there. The CEO, too. I took a slow breath. I could see it in my mind. Ethan sweating under the spotlight, pretending to stay calm while the enormous red message pulsed behind him. Access denied. Authorized. Architect O. Reed Rachel's voice trembled slightly. He's blaming the system, calling it a technical glitch. But Eleanor, she noticed something. The whole room's silent. The only sound is the IT team typing. I took a sip of coffee, letting the bitterness settle on my tongue. Let them talk. Through the cafe window, I watched people hurrying under the rain, rushing, distracted, just like NovaDyne now. An hour later, another message from Rachel. Ethan tried to open the backup file. Aurora's locked the entire storage vault. No copies left. Then another. The stock went down 7% in 30 minutes. I set the phone on the table. Everything was unfolding exactly as it was meant to. No commands, no confrontation. Just Aurora doing what it was built to do. By early afternoon, Seattle's largest financial outlet ran the headline, NovaDyne suffers major system failure during quarterly meeting. Forecast data lost. Thousands of comments followed, half curious, half mocking. The market never cares about reasons, only results. And those results were falling squarely on Ethan's shoulders. That evening, Rachel called again, her voice hoarse. Eleanor knows everything. She found out Ethan hid the system lockout. He tried to erase the logs, but Aurora had already sent backups to the executive board last week. I closed my eyes, leaning back. Good. The truth finally speaks. Rachel hesitated, then said softly, someone in the room said, we fired the only person who knew how to keep this company alive. I didn't respond. Outside, streetlights shimmered on the lake's surface like data reassembling itself. So I felt no joy, no vengeance, only a calm clarity, the kind you feel when music lands perfectly on its final note. I opened my laptop and checked Aurora's system log. A list of failed actions scrolled across the screen. Override attempt. Failed. Admin reset. Failed. Data export. Blocked. Last access. CFO Ethan Cole. Unauthorized. Every line, every timestamp, every trace, brutal in its precision. Aurora never lies. Somewhere in the city, Ethan was probably in his office, hands trembling over his phone, calling anyone he could, maybe a lawyer, maybe another hacker, never realizing that every path he took led back to him. Rachel sent one final message before the day ended. The CEO's in a closed meeting. Ethan's been asked to leave the boardroom. I think she's about to call you. I read the text and set the phone down. That familiar calm returned, the same one I'd felt the first time I ever activated Aurora. Controlled. Certain. I stepped onto the balcony, letting the cold night wind brush through my hair, breathing in the damp scent of Seattle's rain. Below, the city still glowed, cars still moved, and people carried on as if nothing had happened. But on NovaDyne's 23rd floor, an entire empire of data was collapsing. All because one man never understood that real power lies in preparation, not authority. I went back inside and turned my laptop on again. Aurora's interface glowed steady, silent, loyal. In the corner of the screen, a small line of text appeared. System integrity maintained. Awaiting architect verification. I nodded slightly. Just a little longer, I whispered, as if the system could hear me. Tomorrow they'll call. And when they do, we'll finally talk about who really keeps this world running. I shut the laptop. Darkness filled the room, deep and still. Outside, the rain kept falling, as if the city itself were washing away the last traces of everything that needed to end before a new chapter could begin. I couldn't sleep that night. The apartment was silent, except for the steady tick of the clock on the wall. Streetlights spilled through the window, casting pale light over my desk where the laptop rested in sleep mode. I didn't need to open it to know what was happening. On the 23rd floor of NovaDyne, the same people who once sat quietly through meetings were now scrambling, calling, writing emails, trying to save a sinking ship. Close to midnight, my phone buzzed. An unfamiliar number, no name, just an internal corporate code. I let it ring 3 times before picking up. Olivia Reed? The woman's voice was low, calm, unmistakable. Eleanor Park, CEO of NovaDyne. I'm listening. I know it's late, she said, her tone steady but weary. But we need to talk. I can't let Ethan be the only one telling this story. I stayed quiet, listening to her breath through the line. In the background, I could hear faint noise, chairs sliding, muted voices, a meeting breaking up. You know what happened, don't you? Eleanor continued. Aurora wasn't attacked from the outside. It reacted. It protected itself. I've read the system logs you left behind. I leaned back. Then you already know the answer. She sighed. I do. And I know I made a mistake letting Ethan act without consulting you. But right now, Olivia, the company is blind. No one can access the data, and we have 3 pending deals worth hundreds of millions. I need your help. What about Ethan? I asked. He's still CFO on paper, she said, her voice dropping lower, but I've suspended all his operational authority. He's not allowed near the system anymore. I looked out the window. The rain was falling hard, steady. Her next question came between distant rolls of thunder. Can you bring the system back online? I didn't answer right away. There was something in her voice. Not fear, but honesty, admission. And I knew this was the turning point. I can, I said slowly, but not the old way. Eleanor waited, silent. I could hear the faint scratch of a pen like she was taking notes on every word. I'll come back, I said, but on 3 conditions. Go on. First, I want reinstatement, not as an employee, but as the lead architect of Aurora. I need full control. Understood. Second, I report directly to you. No hierarchy, especially not the CFO. Agreed. And third, I'll rewrite the entire security protocol. No one, not even you, can alter it without my authorization. Silence on the line. Then Eleanor spoke, voice low but deliberate. Accepted. I don't want a system that serves people. I want one that protects the company from people's mistakes. If you're the only one who can do that, then do it. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. I'll need 24 hours to relaunch Aurora. After that, all systems will be back online. Thank you, Olivia. Don't thank me, I said. I'm just fixing what never should have been broken. She was quiet for a moment, then said softly, almost. Sincerely, Ethan won't know about this, will he? Not yet. But once Aurora returns, he'll understand. And when he does, every action he's taken will be illuminated. Eleanor drew in a slow breath. I'll have legal prepare. And Olivia, I'm sorry for how we let you go. I smiled faintly. Sometimes leaving is the only way people realize who really mattered. When the call ended, I sat in the dark for a long time, listening to the rain against the glass. I opened the laptop, connected to the backup server, and entered the security key. Aurora came to life, the words glowing on the screen. Architect verification required. I placed my finger on the sensor. A soft click sounded, and the screen shifted. A new line appeared at the bottom. Protocol accepted. System reboot initiated. Everything began to move again. Streams of code cascaded like a heartbeat returning to life. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let the hum of the fan and the flow of data blend with the rain outside. No music, no wine, just the quiet peace of someone who knows the truth is finally finding its way home. In that silence, I whispered, as if to an old friend who had waited too long. We're coming back, Aurora, and this time, no one will ever touch you again. Somewhere across the city, at that same moment, Eleanor Park probably set her phone down on her desk, gazing through the fogged glass of her office window, exhaling in relief, unaware that just a few floors below, Ethan Cole sat alone in the dark, staring at a blank screen, never realizing the game he thought he was controlling had already changed hands. The next morning, the Seattle sky was clearer than it had been in weeks, a strange quiet settling over the city. I left home early, wrapped in a light sweater, coffee cup in hand. Across the street, fogged buses rolled by, carrying people rushing into a new day, unaware that in the heart of downtown, a small earthquake was about to begin. The NovaDyne tower rose before me, tall, cold, gleaming, pretending nothing had happened. But I knew inside the air was heavy, tense, like a courtroom before the verdict. The receptionist froze when I stepped through the glass doors. A few familiar faces flinched. Others kept their eyes fixed on their phones, pretending not to see me. A young security guard stood up quickly. "Excuse me, ma'am, do you—" I smiled and pulled a badge from my coat pocket. "Can you scan this and tell me if it still works?" She passed it over to the reader. A soft beep sounded. The light turned green. I tilted my head, still smiling politely. "Looks like I'm still welcome." The elevator to the 23rd floor was silent. I watched my reflection in the mirrored wall. Calm face, no anger, no fear. Only certainty. When the doors opened, the long, gray-carpeted hallway led straight to the main conference room. I could hear the murmurs as I walked past. They hadn't expected me to return, at least not this soon. The glass doors slid open, and every gaze in the room turned toward me. Ethan Cole sat at the head of the table, immaculate in his tailored suit, trying to look composed. He looked up, startled for a split second, then forced a thin smile. "Olivia!" What a surprise. "Not really," I said, setting my laptop on the table. "Mrs. Park asked me to come." Eleanor Park stood by the window, holding a folder. She turned, her voice cool and steady. "Sit down, Ethan. Today's meeting will include a few changes." He stiffened, masking irritation. "We can talk later, Eleanor. I'm in the middle of a—" "You've been in the middle of things for 2 days," she cut in. "Sit down." The room froze. I opened my laptop and connected to the system. Aurora came to life immediately. Its swirling symbol glowed across the main screen, washing the room in soft blue light. Ethan's face shifted the moment he saw it, color draining before he forced his composure back in place. "I don't think it's wise to open the system right now," he said, voice carrying an edge. "We haven't confirmed the source of the malfunction." I looked straight at him. "Oh, I think the source is sitting right here." A quiet click filled the room as I pressed enter. Aurora projected rows of graphs, code, and system logs from the past 72 hours. The synthesized voice of the system filled the air. Unauthorized data manipulation detected. Logged by user, E. Cole. The room fell silent. Ethan's face went pale. "That's not right," he stammered. "She must have altered the logs, or—" "I haven't touched a single line of code," I said evenly. "Aurora is just reading its own history. Every command has a timestamp. It can't be changed. It can't be erased." Eleanor stepped forward, placing her folder on the table. "We've already cross-checked it against the third-party server backups. Everything matches. Ethan, do you have anything to say?" He looked around the room, searching for an ally. No one moved. Rachel sat at the end of the table, hands folded tightly, eyes fixed ahead. Ethan tried to laugh, voice cracking. "This is a misunderstanding. I was just trying to fix the problem. Maybe Aurora misread the access logs. You tried to overwrite security keys, hired an external hacker team, and deleted your access history," I said, my words sharp and deliberate. "Aurora doesn't make mistakes. People do." The air felt thick, every breath audible. Ethan opened his mouth, but Eleanor raised her hand. "Enough," she said, her tone like a blade. "You've caused major disruption, cost the company millions in stock value, and worst of all, you lied." Ethan shot to his feet, voice breaking. "You're taking her side? She's the reason—" Eleanor's eyes went cold. "No, Ethan. She's the only one who hasn't lost hers." The room went completely still. I didn't look at him again. My attention stayed on the screen, where Aurora was restoring the forecasting data streams. Soft blue light rippled through the room as the graphs came alive again, numbers rebuilding, data pulsing back like blood through veins. Eleanor's voice was calm but resolute. "Olivia, can you fully restore the system?" "Yes," I said, fingers still moving. "The data's intact. I just need to reinitialize the calibration sequence and authorize proper access." "And who would that be?" I looked up, met her gaze. "Me." Eleanor nodded slowly. "Then do it." Ethan stood motionless, eyes empty. When Aurora finished booting, the final line appeared across the massive display. System active. Architect verified. O. Reed. A few people began to clap softly, not celebration, but acknowledgement. Respect. Rachel smiled faintly, the tension in her face finally easing. Eleanor turned toward Ethan. You're suspended, effective immediately. Legal will handle the rest. He didn't respond. Gathering his papers with shaking hands, he stepped toward the door. As he passed me, his voice came low and rough. You won, but you have no idea what you've created. I met his gaze, calm and steady. I don't need to. I just fixed what was already right. He left. The door closed softly behind him, the sound final, like a full stop. I sat down and typed the last command. Aurora ran smoothly. Graphs brightened, data flowed, and the system's heartbeat steady once more. Eleanor walked over and rested a hand on my shoulder. Thank you, she said quietly. You didn't just save the company. You reminded us why we ever trusted the data and the person who built it. I smiled faintly. A system never betrays the one who truly understands it. Outside, sunlight poured through the glass walls, stretching across the conference table like a line drawn under the past. The storm had passed, leaving behind a new kind of silence, not fear, but respect. And inside me, one thought lingered. Aurora was back, stronger than ever. But this wasn't the end, because after the truth comes to light, what people fear most isn't the mistake itself. It's the one who knows exactly where and why it happened. The conference room slowly emptied. Calls overlapped, congratulations were exchanged, and glances of admiration mixed with unease. I stayed where I was, watching Aurora's interface shift into full stability, its soft blue light filling the room like the steady heartbeat of something that had come back to life. No red alerts, no warnings, just calm. The color of peace after the storm. Eleanor Park still stood by the window, looking out over the city. She didn't speak, but the coldness that used to define her gaze was gone. Maybe she finally understood the value of silence, the one weapon Ethan never learned to use. I closed my laptop, feeling the cool metal beneath my fingertips. Aurora was back where it belonged, and so was I. Rachel approached, smiling softly. Everything's running again. The data's perfectly aligned. I don't know what to say except thank you. I was just doing my job, I said, my tone gentle. Now it's your turn. Teach the team how Aurora works. Don't let them just use it. Make them understand it. Rachel nodded. I will. Eleanor turned from the window and walked toward me. Olivia, the board met right after he left. They've unanimously appointed you Chief Data Officer. You'll oversee all analytical infrastructure and forecasting systems. Equal authority to the CFO, though I suspect that position will stay vacant for a while. I smiled faintly. I don't need a title. I just need to work the right way. You'll have everything you need, she said, her voice firm. For the first time, I saw more than respect in her eyes. I saw trust, something rare in a world that usually trusts only profit. After the meeting, I went back to my old office. It was the same room, but emptier, cleaner, like it had been waiting. The nameplate was gone, the coffee mug missing. I set my laptop down, plugged it in, and opened the lid. Aurora came alive, the greeting bright against the dark screen. System status, stable. Architect recognized. Welcome back, Olivia. I smiled, a real one, the first in a long time. I typed the day's first command, and Aurora answered instantly, lines of perfect data unfolding. Everything was running smoothly again, quiet, balanced, as if nothing had ever gone wrong. Eleanor stopped by once more, pausing in the doorway. We just avoided a disaster, she said, and this time we won't let stupidity steer us again. When she left, I stayed at my desk, watching the skyline through the glass. The evening light washed over Lake Union, yellow and gold, streetlights flickering on one by one. Cars moved, people hurried, life went on, unchanged except for me. My phone buzzed, a new internal memo. The company has officially terminated Ethan Cole's contract. We thank him for his service. Below that, in smaller text, all operational authority for the Aurora system has been transferred to CDO Olivia Reed. I read it and smiled quietly. No gloating, no pride, just a deep calm, the kind that comes when justice finally writes itself in the only language that can't lie: data. I poured myself another cup of coffee, breathing in the warm scent filling the still air. The blue glow from Aurora shimmered across the desk, the color of truth, silent yet enduring. I spoke softly, half to myself, half to anyone who might still be listening. Real power doesn't need to shout. It just needs a single line of code. Aurora responded with one final line on the screen, as if in agreement. Execution complete. System secure. I leaned back, watching as the display dimmed and sleep mode set in. Outside, Seattle drifted into dusk, its reflection rippling over the lake like an endless stream of data. I thought of Ethan, of the years lost, of everyone who once mistook silence for weakness, and I smiled, because they never understood. Silence, at the right moment, can be the loudest sound in any room. I took my last sip of coffee, typed one quiet command. Let's get those reports done, shall we? Then I closed the laptop, letting the soft hum of the machine blend with the steady rhythm of Aurora's pulse. No applause, no spotlight, just me and the world, quiet for the first time. I sat there a while longer, watching the faint glow fade from the laptop screen, then turned toward the window. The city lights had come alive. Somewhere out there, people were still working, still making choices, still carrying the weight of unseen sacrifices. I used to be one of them. Maybe you are too. If you're listening to this, tell me, which moment struck you most? Was it when I was fired without a word of thanks, or when Aurora came back online and silent justice took its course? Share it with me. I read every message, every thought you leave behind. Because stories like this aren't just about work or revenge. They're reminders that silence has its own voice, steady, patient, and impossible to erase. And if you believe in stories where justice finds its way in the most unexpected form, hit subscribe and turn on the notifications. I promise, there's more to come. Stories without heroes, just ordinary people who choose to stand up at the right time. Thank you for listening. Now let's let Aurora rest, and let the world learn how to be quiet for a while.